Ukrainian officials say the Russian military is continuing attacks on the capital, Kyiv, and the northern city of Chernihiv. That's despite Russia's pledge on Tuesday to drastically reduce military activity in both places. Moscow's continued assault is fueling skepticism that peace talks in Turkey achieved any meaningful progress. Meanwhile, Russian forces are also intensifying attacks in the east of Ukraine. In the besieged port of Mariupol, the situation is growing more desperate by the hour.
A month of Russian bombardment has reduced much of Mariupol to ruins. While Moscow has suffered setbacks elsewhere in Ukraine, its efforts to take the key port have been devastating and unrelenting. A comparison of satellite imagery from before the invasion to images from this week reveals that almost no building has been left undamaged. Ukrainian officials say more than 90% of the city has been destroyed. Many who managed to escape the destruction end up here, some 200 kilometers to the northwest in Zaporizhia, traumatized by what they've left behind. We changed shelters 3 times in Mariupol. It's insane what they were doing, dropping bombs. It was frightening. There is no Mariupol anymore. They bombed it completely. Others, like this 3-year-old boy, weren't able to get out unscathed. Dima is crying out for his father, but he can't come to Dima's bedside. He was also injured and is receiving treatment elsewhere in the hospital. They're far from the only ones. This 11-year-old girl was also wounded as her family escaped from Mariupol. On the 16th of March, we succeeded in leaving Mariupol. We were hitchhiking, we were getting rides here and there. In one of the villages, we passed through a Russian checkpoint. They let us through after checking us out, but then we were met with machine gun fire. I remember fainting and a loud noise in my ears. Then I woke up and my mother put me on the ground and started to scream for help. Soldiers ran up to me and tried to stop the bleeding. Milena was fortunate to make it to the hospital. Many others have been less so. Ukrainian officials say around 5,000 people, including over 200 children, have died in Mariupol since Russia's assault began. For the estimated 160,000 residents who remain in the ruins with little water, food or any safe shelter, there is little hope of reprieve. On Tuesday night, Putin made clear that the shelling would only end when the Ukrainians defending against the invasion surrender.
Meanwhile, Russian forces are also intensifying attacks in the east of Ukraine.
Russian attacks have flared again in southeastern Ukraine, like here in Donetsk. It's thought this is where Russia is concentrating its military strength. During talks in Istanbul on Tuesday, Russia's chief negotiator said operations around Kyiv and Chernihiv will be scaled back.
We believe that this is a repositioning, not a real withdrawal, and that we all should be prepared to watch for a major offensive against other areas of Ukraine. It does not mean that the threat to Kyiv is over.
Despite the Russian statement, the regional governor said on Telegram that shelling continued in Chernihiv, though there hasn't been independent verification. The so-called reduction of activity in the Chernihiv region was demonstrated by enemy strikes all night long. Ukraine's general staff spoke on Facebook of a Russian ploy, and Ukrainian President Zelensky also skeptical. The enemy is still on our territory. The shelling of our cities continues. Mariupol is besieged. Missile and airstrikes have not ceased. That's the reality, and those are the facts. Now, Moscow has voiced its summary of the talks. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says there have been no breakthroughs and that much remains to be done.
Well, for the latest on the ground in Ukraine, we're joined by DW correspondent Matthias Bullinger in Kyiv. Hi, good to see you, Matthias. Now, the governor of Donetsk said that the latest attempt to evacuate civilians from the city of Mariupol had likely failed, as convoys of civilians were not being allowed through. What more can you tell us?
Well, this is something that happens often. These convoys, they are planned for almost every day now, and sometimes they're able to leave, sometimes they're blocked from leaving, as it seems to have been the case for today. Some of them have also been shelled. People have died leaving the city. The situation in Mariupol, if you had asked me you have actually asked me 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago what the situation was like, I at that time told you it was dire, it was dramatic, and imagine what happened another 2 weeks later without any food, with water supplies cut and electricity mostly off. So it's really a very, very dramatic humanitarian situation, and people are trying to leave the city via these convoys almost every day, and there are still an estimated 160,000 people in the city.
Matthias, Russian forces bombarded the outskirts of Kyiv on Wednesday. Now, that's a day after Moscow promised to scale down operations there. What's the situation like in the capital now?
Yeah, we could hear that. The shelling has, if anything, intensified. Today we've heard intense shelling again from the direction of these embattled suburbs. There have also been rockets taken down by the Ukrainian air defense over the city or near the city. So we are not seeing signs of the fighting subsiding in any of these areas.
Matthias, considering what you're telling us and what we've just seen in the report there, has the mood changed in Ukraine at all since yesterday?
Nobody in Ukraine believed the words by the Russian negotiator who said that they would reduce the fighting. He hasn't said they would stop. He has said they would reduce the fighting. Russia has announced things like that often, and often that was the prelude to another attack. So when I asked people about what they think about this announcement, they said, well, it sounds good, it's good news, but we don't trust it. And that's exactly the mood that is today. So not a big change. It's in fact not a change to what has been happening the days and weeks before. So people are to go about their lives as much as they can in this a little bit reduced everyday life. Right. Shops are still open, etc. So people are still living in these conditions.
DW correspondent Matthias Bullinger reporting from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Thank you. Well, Russia's war on Ukraine has given added urgency to EU efforts to wean itself off Russian oil and gas. Today, both Poland and Germany have announced plans to address the issue of energy security on the continent. And for more on the impact of the Ukraine war on EU energy supplies, let's bring in Marcin Buzanski. He's a senior advisor at the Warsaw Security Forum in the Polish capital, Warsaw. Marcin, I'd like to start with a soundbite from the Polish Prime Minister today and then get your take on it.
Today we are presenting the most radical plan in Europe to move away from Russian hydrocarbons, away from Russian oil, Russian gas, from Russian coal. This most radical plan is needed. It is needed so that finally Europe will wake up. We knew that Russia is using gas and oil, but especially gas as a tool of blackmail.
Marcin, so Poland is the vanguard in Europe pushing for a complete cut with Russia in oil, gas and coal. Now, we heard this morning that Russia is backing down on its immediate demands for energy payments in rubles. Is the Kremlin feeling pressure now over the threat to its energy exports?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here again. I believe that this whole exchange in terms of paying with rubles for the gas supplies, it's all a publicity stunt. I cannot imagine that the Kremlin expected it will be treated seriously in the face of sanctions and in the face of the ongoing invasion. So I believe they are feeling the pressure. And while, of course, they still have a lot of currency reserves, they can definitely see that the sanctions will have a large impact. And in that view, it's certainly a positive thing that we're seeing coming from Poland. The announcement to cut off all supply of coal, of gas, of oil coming from Russia, and certainly one that was expected from the Polish government, who was making those announcements for a long time, that they'll be willing to do that move, and finally now making it happen, which of course puts even more pressure on Germany to do a similar type of announcement, as we know that has been a difficult case for the German government to decide, but certainly we can see that the pressure will be mounting. And I also think that this is a bigger issue for the European Union, because truly the impact on Russia will be felt by Russia when the EU as a whole is able to cut off the energy supplies from Russia, and that can be made only truly implementing the concept of the energy union. There has been discussion in the recent summit of immediate interventions on the markets in terms of potential of electricity prices, in terms of potential tax cuts to soften the blow, to use this term, and actually allow this common EU blockade to happen. There's no consensus on this, but to really make that felt by Russia, the impact of this move, this is what should be expected from the European Union.
Now, Martin, we spoke to you about 3 weeks ago after Washington rejected Poland's offer to help transfer MiG-29 jets to Ukraine. Does the current situation show NATO was right to avoid a direct intervention?
Well, the MiGs haven't been really a direct intervention. They would have been an escalation in the type of equipment delivered to Ukraine. But I think if anything that we're seeing is that the Ukrainians are doing a phenomenal job. The Ukrainian army is doing a phenomenal job fighting the Russian forces. And the recent defeats around Kyiv, the recent liberations of towns in Ukraine show that they are able to make progress even with the equipment that is delivered right now, which we know very well is still insufficient. So we can only imagine if this engagement would have been increased, what the advances of Ukrainians' populations could be. Now, the case of delivering more equipment is particularly important for the type of equipment that can protect the Ukrainian sky and that can shoot down rockets, shoot down planes. And this is critical not just for the Ukrainian military, but particularly for Ukrainian cities and the Ukrainian population. So this type of escalation, I think, in the delivery is very much needed and would have its positive effect. Now, in terms of direct involvement of troops, of NATO troops on the ground, well, that for sure is too high of a security risk for NATO countries at this point. And in that sense, the decision not to send troops is a standing one and a good, a rational one. But that said, we need to realize the Ukrainians are also fighting our war. It is also a war for our security. If they lose, we will be worse off. So the support provided from NATO needs to be sustained and actually needs to be increased.
Martin Buzanski, Senior Advisor at the Warsaw Security Forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, Germany is also moving to address energy security and its reliance on Russian gas. The government is activating an early warning plan to prepare for possible shortages of gas from Russia. Economy Minister Robert Habeck says a crisis team will closely monitor gas supplies. Habeck, who's with the environmentalist Green Party in Germany's government, is also asking everyone in Germany to conserve more energy.
We are in a situation where I have to say clearly that every kilowatt hour of energy saved helps. And that is why I would like to combine the triggering of the early warning level for gas supplies with the appeal for help to companies and private consumers. You are helping Germany, you are helping Ukraine when you reduce your use of gas or energy in general.
Well, let's bring in Lutz Weischer. He's Head of Policy at Berlin for German Watch. Hi and welcome to DW. What is this early warning plan exactly?
Well, the gas emergency plan, according to German law, has 3 levels. This is the first one. So it's activated if there are serious indications that there are potential threats to the security of gas supply. So it means currently there is no shortage, but there are reasons to be worried. And it means that a crisis unit is being established at the ministry that meets daily, includes representatives of different ministries, of the pipeline operators, of the regulator, of the German state, so the regional level, to monitor the situation closely and to prepare plans in case we would have to activate level 2 or even level 3. It's only at level 3 that the state then would also that's the case when we have real shortages where the state would actually intervene in the gas market. So we're not there yet. This is about preparedness. It's a precautionary move. And I think it's also an important signal to German companies and consumers to take the situation very seriously. And as Robert Habeck just said in the video you showed, every effort to save energy in this critical moment is very welcome.
Now, Germany has repeatedly said it would not stop importing energy from Russia due to its dependence. How concerned is Berlin that Russia may shut off its gas lines?
Well, I think this announcement by Robert Habeck this morning shows that Berlin is very concerned, and rightly so. I think if Russia were to make that decision, Germany could survive that. The German economy could as well, but it would come at very serious economic costs. So decision makers are worried about this. And to get out of this situation, of course, saving energy, improving energy efficiency is crucially important. And in that context, of course, this announcement, as I said, I think is also a very clear signal that everyone who can should do what he can, what she can, what the company can to conserve energy.
How fast could Germany replace Russia's energy imports?
Well, it depends on the fuel, really. I think, and that's important to realize, for most fossil fuels we get from Russia, ending dependence, ending imports immediately or very soon on a similar timeline as what Poland announced is possible as far as coal is concerned, oil is concerned, diesel is concerned. We also import some Russian gas via tankers, so LNG. All of that could be ended very soon, and that would, of course, be a very significant blow to Putin's ability to finance its war, and something that we would also recommend as German Watch to look into this and to do so, because we think alternatives are available, not the least, of course, renewable energy and energy efficiency. For pipeline gas, gas we get through pipelines, the situation is indeed more complex. If Russia leaves Germany no other choice, as I said, technically it would be possible. There are some reserves, there are alternative sources. The emergency plan would ensure that households and critical infrastructure such as hospitals would continue to receive gas, but industry would probably be cut off from supply, and that concerns of important parts of German industry and would have a very serious impact on the German economy. So for gas, for pipeline gas, the approach has been to look at a more managed decline, but there are also some interesting proposals to, for example, use like a blocking account where we would continue to receive gas from Russia, but put the payments on a blocking account that the money is only freed if Russia meets certain conditions, or to levy an additional high tax on these imports. So dealing with the pipeline gas is more complicated, but there are interesting options there as well.
Lutz Weischer, Head of Policy Berlin for German Watch. Thank you.
Thanks.